Okay, welcome back, guys. Now, in the 16th session, we're going to talk finally about something called a box model. It's deliberately put later on because box model is one of the most essential concepts in CSS. And it uses something called margin plus border plus padding and the content. We have talked about margin, border, padding, and actually content that goes inside it. That's why we now talk about what exactly box model is, and then hopefully, then all the margin, border, padding, this will start to make probably more better sense. Okay. What is box model and how box model works? So box model is basically simple. It's a model. It's nothing physically or any content, and there's no code to it. It's just a concept. The basic is that it's absolutely essential to understand it. It's an essential concept that focuses on how content are organized in your CSS. Okay. In your CSS, we say that our contents primarily follow this box model. We have a content area. Okay. Within this, whatever you write, the image is there. So, for example, this content can be your image. This can be your link. This can be your table. Whatever you write here, this can be a simple text. So, this is our content area. Wrapping this content area is something called padding. So, padding comes immediately after our content. Okay. Then there is a border. So that's why you note that every previous example we had a border. Then the space inside the border is basically content. So we say the space between content and your border is what we call padding. Then outside the border there's a margin. So this is the space between the actually content is starting at the border point. Okay. So the actual element is your border. Inside the border there's a content. If you specify padding, that means the space between border and the content, this becomes our padding. And then the space between border and your screen. Okay, so browser screen, the space between your border and your screen becomes your margin. So the starting point of your element basically is border. Okay, so this we say that okay, when we use a border, this border specifies that here is my content starting. If you use an image, or you use, for example, a div tag, paragraph tag, or heading tag, or link tag, or underline, every tag has this basic structure. Okay, so we say border is there. Then this is the starting point. The space inside the border between the content and border is known as padding. The space between border and your Windows screen, the visible web page area, the border of the web page area, this marks the margin. So margin, basically, that's why we use margin as the starting point, that where your content should start. So if this is my border area here, okay, so margin basically specifies that how far my content should be from the border area of my content, or the top border of my content. Okay. So this becomes my what we call margin area. This borderline starts the point. Then inside the border and the content area, this gap is what we control in terms of our padding. Okay. This is basically a box model. If you now relate to it, we talked about that margin is basically space from your browser edge to your actual content area that's starting. Okay. Then inside this content area, we have what we call the content and padding now. This is my margin, this is pending, this basically becomes your border. Whatever text you write here is your text. Okay. And then we specify the text here. This is all about our box model. So this is basically what we refer to in terms of box model. So this box model allows us to add borders around our element. So we have an element and we add a border around it to define spaces between them. So each space is basically identified based on this border space. So the border is quite essential. Even you might not use it, but it is there. Okay, and you might make it visible from 1 pixel to 4th. You can use it. So this border is basically the important. The explanation again, so we have a content area, padding, border. This is all what we talk about. So this hopefully a little bit explains to you that what border is. So if I go in previous slides as well. So if I from margin, this is what margin means. So my screen area is here. Then this is the space that we talk about, and see the border is there and the content inside it. By default, when we use, there is no space here. Okay, so we give some space. This becomes my margin. Space from your border area, from your screen's border to your actually contents border. This is your margin. And if we go inside padding, the padding says, okay, here's my margin. This is the border, the space from border to the element here. This becomes what I call my padding. So this is my padding. This is my border. So border actually is like the main border line or starting point of our content area. Space before this border is known as margin. The space after this border is known as padding. And the border itself marks the point of the content. So this is actually the boundaries of the content, in fact. So we could call this border as a boundary, the main boundary of our content area. Anything outside is a margin, anything inside is a padding, and this actually content is there. So defines where is the content is going to be inside the border, will basically be called padding, where the border of the content itself is going to be outside the border is something called margin. Okay, so this is what basic padding, margin and border, all these entail. And when we put them together, this is what we basically mean by box model. This is what we say a box model is. Okay, so hopefully it clarifies. So this is something that now we will be talking more in detail continuously as we go along. Use a margin to add a space before the border. The border is there, make it visible or not visible, your choice. Add a padding to add a space after the border between your content area. That's the basic rule of thumb that we follow. Okay. Then we talk about something called width and height of an element. We have talked about this previously as well. Within the box model, we need to be a little bit focused on something called width and height. Why? Because every time we use width and height, the width and actually is you added with our padding. Okay. This is a small example here. So for example, if you consider your picture and you have an element here. This element is supposed to be 350 pixels. This is something we talked about earlier as well. So we have a width of the content area set to 320. We set pixel 20 pixels as a left padding plus right padding, then the left border and the right border. So the total width of this component becomes 350 because we have added all these components together. Okay, so 320 for the original size and 20 and then 350. So that's why we need to adjust with this width and height as well. So this box model does also ensures that we understand this. Okay, we've talked about this in previous sessions again, hopefully in detail. To understand now the relation with width and height, width and the padding of top and bottom and left and right. Okay, so we just keep this thing in mind whenever we talk about the box model, because the size and height all depend on this. The structure also uses the size and height, and the space basically defines with respect to margin and padding. When we use margin and padding, the overall size of the components also get affected. Hopefully you understand that. If anything, drop me a question and I will be happy to guide you further. Thank you.